Today's video is going to be a little bit different in tone to what you're used to getting on this channel, because we're going to go back to my legal roots and go through Mr. Justice Fancourt's judgment pertaining to Prince Harry's case against MGN. Now, I'm not going to go technical, so before you click out, I don't do that on my channel. I explain things in plain English. I avoid legalese, because the point is not just to inform you about the judgment and tell you what the media is not reporting on, which there's quite a bit that the media is not telling you in this instance, but also to educate you on the legal system and to hopefully equip you with the knowledge necessary should you ever find yourself in certain situations, or just, information that's just good to know. So if you're interested in that, if you don't mind me delving into my legal roots and going back to how I started this channel, actually, by analyzing judgments and court filings, then buckle up. Let's get started. There have been a lot of headlines recently about Prince Harry's partial success against MGN in his misuse of private information case. The media, I believe, only referred to the press summary, which was around 6 pages, which is understandable. That's why these things are even released, because not everyone is going to sit down and read through a 300-page judgment. That is, I have to say, a special skill. I'm sure many other lawyers will agree that you learn in law school to even survive law school at all, and to be able to keep on top of your assignments and your examinations and all that, let alone when you're out in the real world. So it's not that they're not doing their job right, it's just that you're gonna miss a lot of stuff when you rely on a 6-page document instead of the actual judgment. As such, when you look at the headlines, the media would have you believe that Harry the Dragon Slayer emerged triumphant in one of his many battles against the British press. Now, that's not to say that a partial victory like Prince Harry's is not a victory at all, but there was a lot of criticism against Prince Harry and his legal team, directed their way by the judge, Mr. Justice Fancourt, in this judgment, that the media is just either altogether not aware of because it wasn't in the press summary, or they're just not mentioning for whatever reason. So I thought I would go through the relevant parts of the judgment itself and share with you why this outcome was arrived at and what the judge really disliked about Prince Harry and his team. And I'm not just saying that because I dislike how Prince Harry behaves in general, but because it's quite shocking that a prestigious law firm headed by Mr. Sherborne would make such errors. From a lawyer's point of view, it's a rookie mistake, and it's quite unprofessional and embarrassing, really. I also mentioned in my initial video from June or May that I was really shocked by the conduct of Mr. Sherborne in terms of how unprepared Prince Harry was as a witness. It's not our job as lawyers to coach our witnesses. That's actually against our code of conduct, at least, in certain jurisdictions, because you're meant to let your client tell the truth, tell their own version of events. Having said that, that doesn't mean that you don't adequately prepare them. Make sure that they're aware of the evidence that they have, that they can cross-reference during testimony. So they're not just sitting there like Prince Harry, making complete and utter fools of themselves by saying, this is how I feel, I'm just assuming, I'm just speculating. The witness stand is not for speculation. It's for facts. It's for evidence. And the judge took note of that in his judgment. In paragraph 602, he says that Prince Harry's witness statement was in large part an argument against the vicissitudes of the press, and MGN in particular, and an explanation of the misery that he has suffered from press intrusion, rather than factual evidence that he could give about the specific matters in issue. Basically what we all said at the time. It was all about feelings rather than facts. Or I should be fair and not say all about, because the judge did find that there was some factual evidence that Prince Harry did provide, and we'll get to that in a second. His Honor took a further swipe at Prince Harry's legal team in particular by accusing them of not following the civil procedure rules, which is basically the Bible when it comes to civil litigation. It has rules covering everything in the litigation process. In this case, Prince Harry's statement went way beyond the scope of what was to be tried in court, and that was a big no-no, which really reflected badly on Prince Harry's team. Now, the factual evidence that Prince Harry did provide was listed in the judgment. I'm not going to go through all of them, but essentially it's everything that Prince Harry noticed, witnessed, experienced, rather than felt or speculated about. So for example, if he was on a holiday with Chelsea Davy and the paparazzi were there, even though it was a private holiday, that's factual evidence that could help his case. If he noticed a story being printed about his comments on Paul Burrell, which he relayed to his brother Prince William in confidence, that's factual evidence to back up his claim. So his testimony and his claim wasn't entirely devoid of factual evidence. It's just unfortunate that it was mired in the midst of his woe is me / dragon slayer crusader story against the media. In addition to this factual evidence was a lot of other evidence in the form of invoices, and I believe they were called contribution requests that were sent to private investigators or hackers, and MGN's accounts in general from the time period that was deemed to be relevant by the judge. And with regards to this additional evidence, the judge took a further swipe at Prince Harry's legal team because they practically dumped a whole load of this evidence on him for him to decide on paper rather than bringing it up in court when it should have been brought up so that it could be adequately argued by both parties. Because from my understanding, MGN didn't even get a proper chance to address this whole bunch of physical documentary evidence that was later dumped on the judge to consider for his judgment. He was not happy about that, I'll tell you that much. Speaking of MGN, their main strategy was deny, deny, deny. Barring that strategy, they argued that Prince Harry didn't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, which is the primary test in this case, simply because everything they published was already in the public domain. And barring that, they were simply exercising their freedom of speech or expression, which is guaranteed or provided for by Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So it's basically a balancing act between Article 10 and Article 8 of the same convention, which provides people with their right to privacy, essentially. So it was the judge's job to consider all 33 articles and ascertain whether Harry had a reasonable expectation of privacy and whether the defendant had a right to exercise their freedom of expression in that scenario. And that is exactly what the judge did. He went through every single one of the 33 articles, summarized them effectively, and decided, based on the evidence available to him, whether illegal information hacking took place, but also whether this violated Prince Harry's right to privacy. As you all know, 15 out of the 33 articles were found to have been more likely than not, on the balance of probabilities, a violation of Prince Harry's privacy and obtained through illegal means, whereas the rest of them failed. Now, reasons for failure were many, of course, but examples include the information was clearly already in the public domain and put out by the palace in many instances. In fact, one of these instances was an announcement where Prince Harry would lead the cadets at Eton in a parade, and the judge literally wrote in his judgment, "I seriously question the judgment of anyone who would include this article as part of this claim," meaning Prince Harry and his legal team's judgment, because it was that benign, it was that out of the realm of invasion of privacy that he was wondering, what on earth is this article even doing here? Other examples include anything that fell beyond the time period that the judge found was relevant. So anything in Prince Harry's case before 2003 fell outside of the scope of this case. So the judge found that 2003 was the earliest possible time for these illegal activities to have taken place. Instances where Harry was successful were ones where it was just a clear violation of his privacy in the sense that the information was very clearly not in the public domain. For example, he arranged a holiday with Chelsea Davy to go to Argentina. They went there, and not only was the press waiting for them, but the judge relied on invoices and contribution requests and payment records that were made to people in Argentina at the same time. So that's pretty much a slam dunk for Prince Harry, which is what I really want to stress to everyone, because I know on this channel we are not fans of Prince Harry's conduct, which is very understandable. I mean, he and his wife are pretty much the most reviled couple on the planet for good reason. But when it comes to this judgment, I really want to stress to people that I'm not detecting any bias or favoritism towards Prince Harry from the judge. He was very critical of Prince Harry and his legal team on more than one occasion in the judgment. He wasn't happy with their conduct, clearly basically called them out for not being professional. And I just don't detect any signs of just bias. As I said, I think he relied on the evidence before him. He questioned a lot of Harry's testimony because of the passage of time. And he also acknowledged it was very obvious that Harry was biased in his obsession with bringing down the media, his vendetta, I suppose. All of that to me signaled that the judge did indeed make a fair, impartial decision. And I have always maintained that no matter what I think about Prince Harry, if all of this wrongdoing actually took place, then he deserves his day in court and he deserves to be compensated, which is what ended up happening, albeit on a partial basis. Now, for this cause of action, damages are awarded on the basis of the invasion of privacy itself, but also the distress suffered by the claimant by the said invasion, and also the publication of the private information. In some instances, aggravated damages are also awarded to a party in instances where aggravating circumstances are found to be present. So things that make a situation worse. In this instance, they were found to be present because the legal department and the board at MGN were found to have not only been aware of these illegal activities, but didn't do anything to stop them. So in Prince Harry's case, he was awarded a lump sum of £15,000 just for aggravated damages and a total sum of £140,600 in damages, including the aggravated sum. So in the judgment, the judge actually goes through the breakdown of damages, the amount that he came up with for every single instance, whether it's distress, whether it's the illegal, information gathering, the violation of privacy. And the distress amounts, I have to note, were always the lowest. And the judge would say, I'm going to award him a nominal amount of £1,000, for instance. And that's because, firstly, the judge acknowledged that a lot of Prince Harry's distress was attributed to the media as a whole. And he could only fairly attribute a small portion of that distress to the defendant. As a result, only a small portion could have been awarded. There was also the fact that a lot of time had passed since the publication of these articles. Prince Harry never actually read them himself. They were brought to his attention many years later by his solicitors, and so the impact that it must have had on him was naturally not going to be as significant as if he had come across them himself contemporaneously. You're walking by and you see a headline, for instance. So these factors were considered in awarding damages, and that's why Prince Harry's damages were actually quite low or modest in comparison to what he was expecting. And again, this leans towards an argument that the judge was being very fair in his judgment. In terms of legal costs, now, in general, in the law, costs generally follow the event, which means the losing party pays for the winning party's costs, in addition to their own. It's a really bad place to be in. However, in certain scenarios where, let's say, one party, the defendant, makes an offer to settle, and they offered Prince Harry, this is a real-life example, £200,000. He rejected that and insisted on taking this to trial. where he ended up getting a less favorable sum. So being 140,600 pounds, it's less than the amount offered by MGN. In these circumstances, the court could actually order Harry to pay a portion of MGN's costs, because this would have all been avoided had he accepted their offer to settle. Now, of course, if Harry ended up getting more than what they offered, this wouldn't even factor into the situation at all. This is solely relevant to when you get a less favorable judgment than what was offered to you by the other party. So it will be interesting to see if Prince Harry is liable to pay a portion of MGN's legal costs, so that he maybe could learn a lesson and accept the settlement in the future. That's not to say everyone should accept the settlement. If you know you have a strong case and you are willing to, go fight it out in court, then by all means. But unfortunately, sometimes these things happen where you end up in a less favorable position and you could suffer the consequences of that. Courts and lawsuits are not a walk in the park, as you all know, which is ironic because I actually found this topic to be quite easy for me to turn into a video as opposed to scouring the news and trying to come up with a script and a whole, topic to discuss. So yeah, it was a nice change to talk about this, and it will be interesting to see if the Dragon Slayer will be held liable for a portion of the costs, but I suppose only time will tell. That's it. I'm gonna cut it out here. I'm just blabbering at this point. So yeah, I'm gonna go have some lunch. See you later.